with Pezzolano it wasn't going to work out. I think it's one thing having a good promotion record in South America. I think one or two people had spoken to him, from his work in Spain, were maybe not quite as convinced, suggested the lack of adaptability. I think some of his tactics at Watford were questionable. I don't think 4-4-2, which he played in one of the recent home games, was necessarily a great fit for this squad of players. I think it's more of a 4-2-3 kind of squad. 4-2-3-1. So it hasn't surprised me hugely that it's not worked out.
Benjamin Bloom said to me last week, had a little dig at me, I think he did, Connor, because he pointed out the fact that Pezzolano had 7 points from his last 3 games and it still wasn't enough. And a man Leeds fans are familiar with coming into the job.
Yeah, it's a young squad, isn't it? Really young squad, and I think there's been a few murmurs from inside the camp, if you're to believe reports, that they're not quite happy with Pezzolano's strict approach. Interesting how Grazia's come in already, and he's mentioned Louza, he's mentioned Georgie, and he's mentioned Bar being effectively key to his plans going forward, specifically Bar as well, who doesn't feel like it's kind of worked really with Pezzolano. I feel it might be more of a 4-3-3, and I think that will be very attacking. We've seen Grazia deploy that before as well. Highly successful coach at Watford, probably their most, it's legendary status there, probably since Taylor. Peter Taylor's probably their last big legend from Grazia onwards. But
what did you make of him at Leeds, Connor, Javi Garcia?
Yeah,
he wasn't there for very long, was he?
No, he wasn't. I think he was he was a good manager, but at the wrong time. I think what's really important about Grazia, and I get why Leeds made the appointment, it's a man manager. It's bringing someone in who can put the arm around the shoulder. And I think that's where what Watford need. They've gone, as I said, from a very strict manager in Pezzolano to Grazia, arm around the shoulder, young squad. I think it's a really good appointment, to be honest with you. And I think it's gonna tug on the heartstrings of the Watford fans as well.
They did that with the Deeney announcement video with him meeting Grazia as well. They did all of that thing. What was interestingly is reportedly, Gab, he was sacked for not picking players who had a certain agent, Arnaud Moggi Bayat, if I pronounced that correctly. Club have obviously denied that, but it's the sort of thing you could see being true at a club like Watford. Yeah,
I think there is possibly a power question mark with Watford and the way that they operate. I always thought it was funny when they have Gianluca Nani as sporting director, who's also sporting director in Udinese, and that kind of raises some issues from a logistical point of view, whether you can be present on a day-to-day basis at a club in England and one in Italy. So I think there's definitely some question marks about how stable Watford are in terms of the day-to-day side of things. At the same time, I think when it comes to Watford, I was actually really excited by a lot of their recruitment in terms of the potential upsides of a lot of the players they brought in, particularly Nestor Ivan Kunda, who I think is a huge talent and could be anything. But the man management, as Connor I think really articulately pointed out, you need good man management and good motivation for a young squad. Older players are better at looking after themselves, whereas young players need to be looked after correctly.
It was that video in the changing room, wasn't it, of him giving that kind of Churchillian speech, and the players, you could tell, weren't quite having it, and the fans were obviously not too happy with him singing "You're getting sacked" in the morning to their own manager, even when they weren't losing games. So they're in a decent position, Watford, 11th, but it's now 22 different managers since the Pozzo family took over the club in 2012. Quick quiz question for you both.
You're not going to ask me to name them all.
Not name them all. Can you name the longest serving Watford manager during that time? Gav, we'll start with you.
One promotion with Jokanovic, but he wasn't there for...
This is in terms of games managed as well.
Games managed, okay. Is it Garcia?
He's second, I think, in terms of games managed. He was the longest serving in terms of length. Connor, do you know the answer to this one? There you go. Gianfranco Zola, 75 games in charge he had. Connor, of the 23 different managerial spells in charge of the club, 8 of them have now lasted for 15 games or fewer. Wilder, Ranieri, Edwards and now Pezzolano have been less than 15 matches since 21-22. Is it just Watford, or does the club really need to change? They just seem to do it. It's a joke now. It's a running joke, isn't it? They sack their manager.
Yeah, I mean, you look at you talk to any Watford fan, and they know it's a basket case of a club right now. It just is. But like you just quite rightly said, it just appears to be Watford, and the Pozzo family have been there for so long now, and obviously they've had that almost like co-alignment with Udinese as well. it's brought success. We've seen that previously, especially when you look at Watford and being on the cusp of Europe under Grazia not so long ago. But there has been, like you just mentioned, Ranieri, Wilder. I mean, you go through the list, and we were,
Hodgson was there briefly as well.
You forget, don't you?
Yeah.
You absolutely forget since 2012 the amount of managers. It's ridiculous, and then you question the continuity and how that's going to build any sort of consistency. But Grazia, at least we know, is as a foundation at Watford. The fans are all on board with the appointment as well. You're hoping for a Watford fan's sake that this can be the appointment, because it's happened before. Was it 20 months or ish months? That can maybe elongate this time, because it must. I can't imagine. I mean, from a Leeds United fan's perspective, we had that with Massimo Cellino for a period of time where it was manager after manager after manager, so I can understand it. But this has been since 2012, 2013. It's staggering, really.
It really is staggering. They are in a decent place in the table, though, Gab. They're not that far off the playoffs. They've got some top players that Connor's already touched upon. Bar, Aaron Kunda, Chaptadze, Loser as well.
Yeah.
Can they make the playoffs this season now they've made this managerial change?
Yeah, I think they've got a squad that's, in terms of potential upsides, if they get it right, is a very high ceiling. I think for me, what I'd be looking at is, can they add that core? Because you look at the squad that won promotion in 2015, they had a nice balance. Craig Cathcart, for instance, players, Troy Deeney. I don't think they necessarily have that this time round, and that's what I would be looking at to try and fine-tune that balance. I think it's great to be investing in these high potential assets, but I think you need some experienced players who can manage the dressing room as well. It can't all be on the manager.
Absolutely right. As I said, this is a manager's special today, and we've got an awful lot to talk about from the Championship. One out of work manager, Connor, at the moment, hotly linked with the Rangers job, is Danny Rohl. Kieran McKenna also slightly in contention, rumours circling that he might be getting that job. But Danny Rohl looks to be the most likely candidate right now. What does this say about kind of the quality of managers in the Championship, and what do you think of this link to Rangers?
Yeah, I think and there's two things to talk about. The quality of manager that we know that Danny Rohl is. I think there's a conversation there, but I think there's a conversation also with the scenario now at Rangers and someone like Danny Rohl and another manager maybe of Danny Rohl's level going into Rangers right now. I think there's two different conversations there. If we're just talking about the level of Danny Rohl, we're all very aware, and maybe it's been downplayed how good he is. I'm seeing a lot online from maybe Rangers fans and other fans in and around that sort of sphere saying, he's finished 12th with Sheffield Wednesday, but the context is being completely missed. Completely missed. I remember seeing a Barry Bannon interview around about 3 or 4 months ago, and he said, because the rhetoric is now from Rangers, it's another Russell Martin. It is not for me. I mean, they're polar opposites in a sense. Russell Martin wouldn't adapt. Danny Rohl went into a Sheffield Wednesday side where he had to adapt. It wasn't passing out from the back football of which he wanted to implement. He wants to play that style of football, high pressing, passing out from the back style football. They had to go direct with the profiles that they had and then have like second phase transition in terms of pressing. So a very pragmatic manager. I love his style of football. I think he did wonders with a very below average Sheffield Wednesday side in the circumstances as well with Chansiri, etc., which Wednesday fans will know all about. Massive fan of Danny Rohl. I think he's been underplayed a little bit. I think Rangers would, I think it'd be a really good appointment. His resolve will be tested, though, if he is to go there with the situation at Rangers now, and that can't be underplayed.
The other point I would make as a distinction between Röhl and Russell Martin is I think Röhl's side have a plan for what to do if they lose the ball. They always tend to attack in a 3-2-5 shape, and the configuration of that can change. It's like a team sheet 4-2-3-1 a lot of the time, but it's in possession it often ends up being a 3-2-5. And I think, it's quite zonal the way his teams play, and they're very good at defensive transitions. And when they've conceded goals, it's often been because of individual errors from defenders, not necessarily how the team's set up with the ball. So I think with better players, I think Röhl will be able to get his ideas across very nicely. But I completely agree with Connor. I think he's more.
And just adding to what Gab said there, this is a guy who's worked under Hansi Flick, Ralph Hasenhüttl, and has a high pedigree in the game at such a young age. There's there's a lot worse that Rangers could do right now in terms of a managerial appointment. We don't know if this is going to happen. Obviously, McKenna's been spoken about. I don't think that's going to happen with Kieran McKenna. The eyes will be set on the Premier League, I think, for him once again. But Danny Rohl, I don't mind. But yeah, maybe it's right to talk about Rangers right now in the situation there. And if
I don't think they can get anyone better than Danny Rohl. I know we've spoken about Rohl so many times. I think Rangers are a really difficult club where obviously they're absolutely massive and their fan base is absolutely huge. But they're not going to attract, a manager currently in a Premier League job or a Premier League manager of that level. They're going to have to maybe look at managers in the Championship. And I understand completely that the Russell Martin thing couldn't have gone any worse and they're stung by that and they don't want to go back to the Championship. But Danny Rohl, Gab, is someone you've spoken about as being able to manage in the Champions League. The job he did at Wednesday, I think he even lost 5 of his first 6 games at Wednesday and they were really struggling. He overcame all those issues and put together a really good team that were challenging for the Championship playoffs. His ceiling is so high. I think Rangers would be quite lucky to have him.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely think he's got the potential to manage in the Premier League, Champions League. So I definitely think he's somebody who could take Rangers forward in both in Europe and domestically.
I think the problem with it is with everything that's happened with Russell Martin and the chaos that ensued there. Bear in mind the last game he had to get a police escort out. They'd win a game in the last minute with, Aaron scoring the win. I think it was against Livingston, might have been another side, let me know in the comments. But they then, straight after they scored the winning goal, were still singing Martin out. And it's got to a point now where I think if you're a Rangers fan, you want a guarantee. And pulling on that heartstring again, we can go back to Javi Gracia, the appointment going to Watford, it pulls on the heartstrings a little bit. You get Gerrard back at Rangers.
He said no, though.
And exactly, and that's the point. But he's had several meetings with the Rangers higher ups, and they've not managed to get it over the line. The problem is now, whoever they go and get is a downturn from Steven Gerrard, according to Rangers fans. I think Danny Röhl is a better manager than Steven Gerrard, a much better manager. However, he broke the cycle, didn't he? Gerrard up there, he won the league. He took it away from Celtic. So it's then going to be this very angry fan base right now because of the ownership, because of Russell Martin. Whoever goes in now, I think you've got to be really careful as a manager, and obviously very careful as the higher ups at Rangers, who you then go and get as a personality as well.
I completely understand that, and I was going to say I think Rohl has done very well at working at a club, not in similar circumstances in terms of the size of the club or the fan base, but with difficulties going on in the background. That's what he's proven at Sheffield Wednesday. So I'd like to see him at a bigger club and fighting for a title. And I think it'd be a really good appointment, Gab. Any final words on Rohl?
I think I'm really excited about what he can do with a more stable infrastructure, because I think his hands were tied at Sheffield Wednesday, and I think maybe one of the reasons why he's taken a while to go back in and get another job, and I'm sure he wouldn't have been short of offers since the end of last season and even the back end of that campaign, but I think he's keen to take the right one.